Let's have a listen to one of the exchanges between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden.
Do you believe for a moment what he's telling you in light of all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID? He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. He's on record as saying it. He panicked or he just looked at the stock market, one of the two, because guess what? A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So, Mr. President?
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
There's nothing smart about you, Joe. I tell you what, that is going to stick. I wonder if you'll see that on a presidential advertising slogan at one point between now and the actual election date in November. Nothing smart about you. I think there's a song like that. Nigel Farage, of course, was up watching it for US networks and because he wanted to tell us what he made of it all. Nigel, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Now, what a tour de force. You know, I've woken up this morning. I hope you've had a chance to have a little bit of a breather, or a nap of some kind. But the number of people talking about what a terrible spectacle it is, how the American people have lost out. This is exactly what the American people want to see, isn't it?
Oh, yes. I mean, look, proper head-to-head debates. They've been doing it ever since Kennedy versus Nixon. So for 60 years, they've been doing this. They have their own commission that sets up these debates each time. And of course, we've had times here when prime ministers like Theresa May even refused to do public debate. Right. So the fact they're happening is, of course, a very good thing. Look, let's be frank. Last night was not the most edifying spectacle. We had two candidates who pretty much constantly talked over each other. And that was a little bit disappointing. I thought on content, Trump was incredibly strong on law and order and very good on the economy. But in terms of style, and don't forget, I'm a friend of the president's. I know him well. I almost think he was trying a bit too hard. Yeah, sure. He was punching. Sleepy Joe's not smart. China had your lunch. I mean, there were some good lines in there. Yeah. There were some very good lines in there. But the truth of it is that he should have just eased back a little bit, because when Trump's at his best, he's got some very good comic timing. But you can't do that if you're rushing. So I feel the president tried a bit too hard. And being objective about it, even though Biden stumbled several times on numbers, couldn't quite put his sentences together, he didn't actually fall over. And given that the bar of expectation was so low for Biden, I mean, most people thought he couldn't stay awake for 90 minutes. Right. So, let's be objective. It wasn't that bad a night for Biden.
It wasn't that bad a night for Biden, but I still find it hard to see how it is that many of the pollsters have put him as the winner of the election, of the debate rather, because it doesn't seem to me that he actually made any great points. I mean, he did all the things that those who are critical of President Trump would say. He questioned his coronavirus policies. Yeah. He said loads of people had died. He sort of pointed out that Donald Trump didn't pay any tax. He did all the stuff that we knew he would do, but what he didn't do was kind of say what he would do if he was in charge.
No, I mean, there was nothing memorable from Biden whatsoever. But it was a relatively safe performance, although he got rattled at one point and shouted, "Shut up, man," yes. Trump, which I thought, well, okay. I mean, look, there are two more of these debates to go. I still think there's a very high likelihood in one of these debates that Biden just breaks down. It completely loses his train of thought and his thread. For now, I think what Trump needs to do is to reassess his style. I think, interruption is great. All right. In free flowing debate, interruption is great. He perhaps just tried a bit too hard and did too much of it. But look, I think the most important issue in this election is law and order. All right. And Biden was asked about Black Lives Matter, the movement, and Chris Wallace, who chaired the debate, never really followed up. Never really got an answer on whether Biden supports the aims of BLM. And then we had the Antifa bit. All right. Now, the president says Antifa are akin to a terrorist organization. I have to say, I rather agree. And Biden said Antifa is an idea, not an organization.
Which is plainly incorrect, right? Oh, I think we may have lost Nigel there for a second. We'll try and get Nigel back. He's just frozen on the screen there for a moment. The basic kind of premise of this particular debate, we talked about this yesterday with Sebastian Gorka, was for President Trump to ensure, and he said one particular thing which I thought resonated very much with those people who have seen Joe Biden as a career politician. He said, I've done more in 47 months than you've done in 47 years in Washington, D.C. And I think it's hard to argue with that particular point of view. You've also had, of course, Joe Biden making accusations about Donald Trump not kind of in some way diminishing and not condemning white supremacy. And basically Donald Trump pivoted away from that and made out that it was nothing to do with white supremacy or Black Lives Matter. It was actually to do with law and order in the cities of the United States, where the cities are in fact on fire in many places, partly and entirely to do with the fact that they're run by democratic governments locally who are very reluctant to crack down on the kind of left-wing activities that have caused an awful lot of the trouble. There's no question. He doesn't want to calm things down, said Joe Biden. He wants to pour gasoline on the fire. But when he was asked to condemn the white supremacist groups, Mr. Trump said, sure, I'm willing to do that, but almost everything I see is from the left wing. I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace. And then Donald Trump was asked, what do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a name. And, of course, that's one of the most contentious situations now in the United States of America, where the left and the right have become so divided that there is literally no common ground between any of them that they can have, which is really, really unfortunate for those of us who love the United States of America, of which I'm obviously one of them, and as Nigel Farage is as well. We're trying to get Nigel back at the moment. He's still struggling with his connection, but I think we're all set. Nigel, I don't know if you were able to hear much of what I was saying there, but interestingly, Joe Biden kind of didn't really go far enough, I think, for those people on the Republican side, or those, sort of floating voters, if you like, such as they are, to kind of condemn the actions of Antifa and the actions of the left, did he?
No, as I say, he said Antifa is an idea, not an organization. Well, let me tell you, Mike, I've seen Antifa turn up at my meetings, threaten members of the public, and that's in this country.
Yeah.
This is deeply unpleasant, violent organization, and Biden cannot condemn it. He wasn't pushed hard enough. I mean, Trump was pushed. Do you condemn far-right activism? Biden never was, and that was the point of the debate where I felt Chris Wallace did not do a very good job. But here's the point. There's a large chunk of the activist base of the Democrat Party who support Antifa and the Black Lives Matter movement, which, by the way, is completely different to racial equality and justice, all right?
Yeah.
And I think this is Biden's weak spot. And this is why I believe this election is won or lost in the middle-class suburbs of the big cities. People living there, and they're seeing 2 or 3 miles away from where they live, rioting, looting, shootings, shops being burnt down. And at the end of the day, Bill Clinton years ago said it's the economy, stupid. There's always one issue that emerges as the key election issue. I think it's law and order. I believe that's Trump's chance to win. And anyone that looks back at that debate last night will see that Trump was at his most fluent on the issue of supporting police forces and defending law and order.
Yeah.
And so, in performance terms, it was almost a score draw. But I think in content terms, and in terms of setting out the agenda for the rest of the campaign, the Trump team will be very pleased with that.
And just in terms of your own knowledge, Nigel, of the American electorate, how much do you think of the Trump vote is in danger of falling away? Because people have said to me in the past, as long as Trump holds his line and he gets the same vote out that he got out 4 years ago, he'll win.
Well, look, the hardcore base is what it is. And probably the hardcore base of those that vote for Trump is 43%. All right? They love him. And I mean, the more he punches Joe Biden, I mean, they're cheering. They love it. They're pouring another beer. They're having a great time. But you've got to get that swing vote that is there in the middle. And that is very much going to be among the middle classes. Interestingly, where Trump is doing very well is with the Hispanic vote, better than any Republican president has done in modern times. I am still deeply suspicious of the polls. I think we've kind of reached a position in America where, no one dares tell anybody they've got an even vaguely conservative opinion, fear of being shouted down. So, I still think, don't listen to those who tell you it's all over, Biden's going to win it, it's all done. It's not. I still think Trump will come through as the winner of this. I genuinely do.
Yeah, and also we've got some vice presidential debates which might prove to be quite interesting, because I would suggest, and I don't know whether you'd agree, that Joe Biden's choice of vice presidential nominee is quite a volatile one.
Well, she is, and of course, if she tries to play the race equality card, then it's not difficult for Mike Pence to point out that while she was a prosecutor, out way west in California, that it was under her watch that huge numbers of black people were in prison for very, very lengthy sentences. Pence is a known quantity. Pence is naturally very conservative in every way, very Christian. We know exactly what we're going to get from Mike Pence, and he's been a very, very reliable vice president to Donald for the last 4 years. Kamala Harris, none of us know. I mean, I tell you what, I've done these debates, Mike, all right? I've done head-to-head debates with prime ministers, head-to-head debates with Nick Clegg a few years ago when he was deputy prime minister. And the truth is, you don't really know how good or bad anybody is until they're put in that environment. Yeah. And for Kamala Harris, this is a massive step up. It'll be a very interesting debate.
And that's what's good about Donald Trump's performances in a way, because you're quite right to say that he could have been criticised after last night for going in a bit too hard on Joe Biden. There were fears that that might make people feel a bit kind of sorry for him because, it might have looked a bit like bullying. But on the other hand, Donald Trump's a master kind of performer, isn't he? I mean, don't forget, this is a guy who made a fortune on The Apprentice, and he knows how to perform in front of a camera. So he can easily change his style, I would imagine, if he wishes to, for the next debate.
Yeah. I mean, look, the idea that Trump was rude to Biden called him a clown, and Biden called him a racist.
And a liar.
So there was a fair bit of insult being thrown back in his direction. Look, I mean, remember 4 years ago when Hillary said, "I would not want you, Donald J. Trump, in charge of our judicial system." Brief pause, and Trump said, "Yeah, because you be in jail." Now that was a genius moment.
Yeah.
But as with everything, whether it's making a serious point, whether it's making a comic point, it's always about timing. And it's always about the slight use of the pause, all right? And when Trump does that, that's when you see why he was so good on reality television. That's why you see he earned hundreds of millions of dollars doing The Apprentice. And I felt last night, and I'm a supporter, but I felt last night he was in a little bit too much of a rush. And I think he just needs to get back on his heels a bit more than his toes for next time round.
Yeah, because you wrote a fascinating piece, I thought, yesterday in the Telegraph about Trump the man, who very often does not really get a look in, because he's clearly, there's more to him. I mean, it's partly his own fault, I think, that he's treated like a sort of pantomime villain, because I think he quite likes that. But you were talking about the fact that he is genuinely helpful to people, the sort of the loyal, not just Trump fans, but people in the police forces in America, emergency service workers, the army. These people all love him.
Mike, I have over the last decade and more met many of the world's leaders, all right? And I've also watched those leaders interact with other politicians, with big businesses, but I've also watched them interact with ordinary people. And I promise you that most people in global politics, and certainly most of the leaders in this country, if they do a quick walkabout and meet 20 members of the public, they get behind the door and say, "Oh, thank God that's over." Trump loves going out and meeting people,
right.
And some people may say it's cheap, but he'll compliment the woman on her dress, or he'll compliment the guy for how fit he's looking, and he makes them feel $1 million. And I told a little story in the Telegraph yesterday, true story. It was early in his presidency. I was having dinner with him and his family in the Trump Hotel in DC, and a young waitress, she couldn't have been more than 22, 23, said to the president, "I enjoyed your speech this morning." It was the annual conservative activist conference that goes on in DC or near DC every year. He looks at her and says, "You were there this morning?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Right, call the manager. This lady's taking a break." And this waitress sat down next to the president of the USA and had his undivided attention for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Now, he didn't need to do that. There was no advantage for Trump in doing that, but he genuinely has an interest in people, and he does have an extraordinary charisma and charm.
Absolutely right. And there was a man once who had the same abilities here in this country called Boris Johnson. But I'm not sure quite what's happened to him. He's going to have a very tough day today. Let's just move back to the UK for a moment. He's got a vote later on, which he may lose, despite the fact that the Speaker is not allowing the amendment to be discussed. He's got a Prime Minister's Questions event with Keir Starmer, which he'll probably lose because he couldn't remember what the coronavirus rules were yesterday. And then he's got another one of these ghastly sort of Grimm Brothers media briefings with Valance and Whitty. Who knows what we're going to be getting at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the main criticisms about Boris is that he doesn't do any detail. You know, he just does the big picture. Let's all be happy and jolly. Isn't it wonderful? Okay. And yesterday, unfortunately, he proved he doesn't do detail. And that is a stick with which Starmer, I suspect, at PMQs today, will beat him with very, very effectively. And I think behind the scenes in Downing Street this morning, they're going to be saying to the Prime Minister, for goodness sake, get a grip. Because the impression that I'm getting, Mike, from all the contacts I've got out in the shires, particularly, is they're losing confidence quite quickly. They like Boris Johnson, but it was said to me once that Boris is a brilliant non-executive chairman. He's a brilliant guy to go around, give speeches, meet people, you know, put around a bit of optimism, but he's a terrible CEO because he doesn't make good decisions. And he has urgently got to prove that he can be the CEO of the United Kingdom. And I have to say, he needs to do this very, very quickly.
And I think you've actually put your finger exactly on what the problem is. I mean, I'm one of the most optimistic people I know, and even I'm starting to wonder where the optimism is going to come from. And without optimism, we don't have anything.
Yeah, that's right. And that's one thing Trump does rather well at times, isn't it? You know, it's going to be great. You know,
yeah, let's make it greater.
You know, Boris, as you say, he's always been good at this. And when he was mayor of London, he was good at this. Yeah. But he looks somewhat beaten down. That was a dreadful, dreadful mistake to make. And he's going to have to work damned hard to get back credibility as a leader. And he's got to go in there at PMQs at midday today. He's got to be absolutely on top of his brief.